Yo, 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 what's happening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages? It is your hostess with the mostest. It is PKR, Pastor Keenan Riley, and we are here on People Suck, Love Them Anyways, setting in the third level of hell, setting in a homemade sauna, setting in times, setting probably back in 1973, whenever you were out on the front porch in the dead middle of summer and you just had beads of sweat on your lip while you're trying to have a conversation with somebody. Yeah, man. So how you doing, Nick? Besides burning up, man. I'm telling you, hey, next week I don't care what happens, we're going to the basement.
We're going to the basement. We'll record on our phone again. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So I just, man, it is what it is. But like, goodness gracious, great balls of fire, literally fire.
Heat index was right in the 9,500 something degrees.
Yeah, I think it was right at 100, man. So
we are currently recording while being blasted by the sun through these gigantic windows.
I agree. I think we just said this last week about how like it was a great idea in hindsight, like to throw it up here, beautiful views. And I feel like we will enjoy this so much in the winter. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, whenever you're up here in a nice, comfy sweatshirt and you're just chilling, it's dark outside already. Like, you know, I think it'll be amazing, man. I think it'll be some cool views. In the dead middle of summer, worst idea in history, my man.
Yeah, especially considering there's no like central air in this
yeah. We have a fan that is sitting in the corner that's basically blowing hot air at us. So we're blowing hot air. I was going to say, we're blowing enough hot air, and then there's a fan blowing hot air at us too, man. So it's a no-win situation up here. If you don't know Jesus, let me tell you something. Hell's going to be 7 times hotter.
Yeah,
so
that's what I hear.
If you don't know Jesus, come sit in this room with us for an episode, and you may change your mind, man. You know,
you may change your mind, especially if you be wearing them, suits.
Oh man, yes. Oh, absolutely. So is that a thing? Did I miss something?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's the general dress code. I mean, everybody who rolls into a church, they're like, what do I got to wear?
Let's go. We're going to be divisive tonight. We're going to talk about some stuff we're going to shake the tree a little bit. Southern Baptist Convention, my good friend. Yeah, Southern Baptist Convention, my friend, just voted. I'm thinking today, maybe yesterday, that there are no women allowed in the pulpit as far as preaching is concerned.
I mean, I thought that was already a thing.
I don't know. I just read an open letter from a Baptist pastor today that said that they had voted and solidified, and I think it was, I don't know, man. I don't know what the percentages were, but you know, yeah. But so, anyways, great debate about that situation. Great debate about women being in the pulpit, and yeah, man, I'm just gonna throw you to the wolves. What's your opinion tonight? I'm gonna sit back with my hand on my head right here and just watch you sink this ship. Yeah, sink this ship, my friend.
Sink the ship. I mean, I think the ship's already sunk. Had women drown. I'm just kidding. But I mean, I think it's just, I think really one of the biggest things that I've really pulled from it is something, and I'm gonna throw you into this. Something that you said. There you go. Really is the fact that we don't have enough men, who are standing up and doing what they're supposed to be doing. As we're currently watching this fan fall on its own.
Yes.
It is sliding down the pole there.
Yeah. According to the Baptists, it must be female.
It must be. It must be.
Yeah.
That's where they belong.
Yeah.
But no, I'm just kidding.
In a corner.
In a corner.
Yeah.
In a corner on a pole.
Yeah. Wait,
what? I don't know. I thought that's where you were going.
No, not yet. Yeah, not yet.
But anyway. I think it is one of the biggest things, that you say is if men aren't willing to step up and do, their, what they've been called to do, biblically, at some point, the gospel's got to get spread.
Right.
And I think, if we have women who are more than willing to do so, if we have willing women who are, more than willing and able to do so, I think it is, I think we have to be very careful to tell them to shut up.
Right.
If we have women willing to do things that men are not, willing to spread the gospel, willing to share the gospel, willing to pray for people, willing to teach people, willing to lead people, if we have people who are willing to do that, who am I to say no to that?
Right.
If a woman is up on a stage, whatever, why do we not have a problem with it at a women's conference, but we have a problem with it on a Sunday morning?
Or why do we not have a problem with women singing on stage, like in a worship band or something like that? Like, so they're okay to worship, which to me, a lot of times, if you've been a preacher for any kind of time, I'm sure you've said, hey, let them usher in the presence of the Holy Spirit through worship, and it's like, and so a lot of times we'll have a woman leading the worship in order to usher. So why are they good enough to lead worship but not lead a service?
Right. And I mean, you think about, many different women throughout the Bible who, were important enough to be mentioned. We talk a lot about, like the miracle of the loaves and the fish, right? How women and children weren't really counted in that because
right.
of the times where the Bible was written, women weren't included in those types of, counts and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And so, we think about, how many women are actually notable enough to be mentioned in the Bible.
Ruth.
Ruth. Naomi,
yeah,
Esther, Ruth, you so many women that, and you think about, and I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but the women that Paul actually, uplifts that are doing good for him, in the later New Testament, that Paul talks about some women specifically. My brain is just not working this afternoon.
Right.
But, there are women that are specifically mentioned by name and I guess I could say platformed for what they did. For what they did to further the gospel, further the kingdom of God. You take, Rahab, who was a prostitute, but was, so, because of a single act of obedience, choosing to follow God, choosing to hide the spies, she was included in the genealogy and history of Jesus.
Right.
You have women who have a clear, they have a clear role in the Bible. There are some women who go above and beyond, who sometimes will step up and, sometimes have a spotlight on them. Mm-hmm. And I think, we get into this, I've heard a lot of pastors here recently, especially, your kind of TikTok-y pastors, who have been really harping on masculinity and men's roles and women's roles. And there's been a lot of talk in that lately.
Right.
And it starts to seem and appear, very angry. Mm-hmm. It just seems like there's just this anger, it's just like this Neanderthal anger. Like I think of it kind of like, your cavemen, like men good, women bad. That's what it starts to sound like men hunt, women cook. Like it starts to sound kind of like that from a pulpit.
Right.
And again, I think it just gets to that point, where we've got, female Christian counselors who are leading people to Christ. We've got, there's so many different versions of this that people don't seem to have a problem with, and it doesn't become a problem until we say, Pastor,
pulpit,
Pastor, Elizabeth, Pastor, whatever. I said that's when it seems like we have that problem, and it goes. What's the famous verse, that Paul, says, women are not permitted to teach,
right?
That everybody seems to go back to, and we neglect, and a lot of times, in a lot of things that we read in the Bible, we neglect the circumstances.
Right. Well, what about women Sunday school teachers? And here's another crazy part is that we specifically genderize women. I don't know if that's a word, but I used it. We genderize women. Use it again to do kid studies. You know what I'm saying? To teach kids on Sunday morning and stuff like that. But if you was to put a man in that role, it's like it seems like everything would be out of balance, out of kilter maybe. And so I think a lot of times, man, it's just society in general in which we live in these days. And to me, I'm with it. And Nick quoted me by saying, hey, look, if we had men who would step up and do what they were supposed to be doing, the women wouldn't have to. But in this day and age that we live in, there's a lot of lazy people out there, and because there's a lot of lazy people and because there's a lot of people who's not willing to stand up, take the mantle and say, hey, we're going to church today. For real. The studies show that if a man is the first one to come into a church, there's a 94% chance that his family will follow. And then if a wife comes in, it's a 80 or 70%. And then if the kids come in, it drops dramatically. And so the men have a certain calling and responsibility on their life to be a leader, not only within the church, but within their home to kind of set a tone, and it's if we live in a age and a day where the men are not willing to step up and take responsibility or come to the forefront, somebody's got to take that mantle. Somebody's got to step up and do it. And I say, thank God for the women, right? Thank God for the women who literally their husbands are, on a Sunday morning giving them every excuse under the sun. I'd rather go fish, I'd rather go play golf, or I'm tired, or watch football, whatever. And then that church is not important. So thank God for the women setting that example and dragging those kids to church, dragging herself to church, and then wanting to take on a more important role within the church and saying, hey, look, not only do I want to be a part of it, but I want some skin in the game. You know, like I want to be a part of this. I want to connect to this. I want to grow with this. You know, shout out to them, man, because like, you know, I think like to me, it's not the women's fault for wanting more. It's the men's fault for not wanting more. You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's like, I mean, the Bible is very plain in saying that if we will not praise, that they'll use that the rocks will cry out in our place. And like, I don't see anybody debating whenever God used a donkey to talk. I don't see anybody debating that situation. Yeah, I don't see somebody going, right. I don't see somebody going, well, that donkey wasn't good enough. You know, like God deemed that donkey good enough to pass off a message, right? Like God deemed Paul good enough to carry the gospel even though he was still Saul. Like, you know, God chose the apostles, the disciples. Like God chose these people that we read about in the Bible, even in the worst version of themselves. But God saw better for them before anybody else did.
Like the woman at the well.
I mean,
Jesus using her to go preach to people. You know,
right.
Come here, look at what I'm
and see, and I know like some people are like, well, you didn't preach, you just went back and invited people, and what like that is a testimony though. Like she went and shared her testimony, and because she shared her testimony, guess what happened? Bam! People was drawn to Jesus because of that process. And it's crazy that Jesus met the woman, but not the man. You know what I'm saying? Because why? Because the man wasn't ashamed. You know what I mean? The man wasn't convicted. The man wasn't ready to change. He met the woman at the well. And so it's like, man, again, we talk about things all the time, whether it's dress code. We'll talk about dress code in a minute. But whether it's dress code, whether it's the redback hymnals, or you're singing praise and worship music, whether you're starting at 11 or 10:15, whether you're having church on Saturday night or Sunday morning, what version of the Bible are you reading? Like we have all of this crap. I'm going to call it crap because I feel like that's what it is, man. Like we have all of this stuff that we're fighting about inside of church houses, inside of church members, right? Like we have all this stuff that we're fighting about. And I feel like once I feel like that the enemy is kicked back, feet up, laughing at us, going, see, I don't even have to cause division. I don't have to cause strife and chaos because guess what? Y'all fools are doing it yourselves. You know what I mean? Like y'all are bringing to the forefront stuff that doesn't even matter at the end of the day. It doesn't even matter because if one person comes to the saving grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ, has it not been worth it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really the biggest thing that we need to take away is, you know, I think it's kind of like, you know, there's a lot of things in this world that, you know, it seems like the bad always gets highlighted, you know,
of course,
like police officers, you know, for example,
right.
You know, you hardly ever see the good stories of a police officer being a, you know, hero or anything like that. But God forbid, you know, they shoot an unarmed naked man like what just happened in Louisville,
right?
Or the other
right, and they're all bad.
They're all bad. You know, every cop is bad.
Yeah,
you know? And I think you see that a lot with, you know, people, you know, especially women who have a platform, who are using a stage, you know, who are, you know, quote unquote preachers or whatever you want to call, you know, that specific individual. But, you know, it's always the clips you see are always them saying something blasphemous, right?
Right.
You know, it's always them saying something that's completely off the sleeve, you know, off the cuff, whatever. You know, it doesn't make sense. It isn't biblically accurate. You know, you don't see the women who are actually preaching and teaching things that are actually biblical. You know, and I think it goes back to, again, that thing is, you know, if God is willing to use the rocks to cry out for God, you know, who are we to tell anyone to shut up about God? You know, if they're doing it for the right reasons, if they're really out here trying to talk about God to lead people to Jesus, you know, and they are doing their best every single day, you know, who am I to tell them to shut up? Right. Who am I to tell them that God, you know, and I think one thing that when I was in college, we had a female pastor come and speak to us in our one of our classes, and she was talking about, you know, just the emotional and psychological abuse that she has experienced from men in the church.
Right.
Because, you know, she has to go to therapy herself because, you know, of all the men telling her, you know, she felt truly that she had a calling from God to preach, to teach, to lead. You know, she felt that within her spirit, like someone would feel it's like their identity.
Right.
You know, and it's like, you know, she had men telling her that she's wrong, that she didn't hear right from God.
Right.
You know, she's living a lie, that she's blasphemous, she's evil, she's like disobeying God's call.
Right.
You know, and she feels the complete opposite of that. His name is. But you know, I think it again.
Pray for him.
Right on, pray for him, right? But I think that right there should show us that we are treating, you know, this situation incorrectly. Well, we are pushing people to the brink of breakdowns.
I mean, let's just be honest. So, are we saying that God only speaks to men and not women? Is that what we're saying?
I mean, I do believe that there are people who think that.
Right.
I mean, I really do believe that there are Christian men who think
who literally think that like the woman's place is to cook, to clean, to be a good nurturer,
submissive.
Yeah, submissive. Like, you know, tend to my needs. Like, I don't care if your needs are met. I'm the spiritual head of the household. Blah blah blah. Like, so on and so forth. Like, to me, that is so archaic. You know, that it's not that like. And I'm not saying, listen, there shouldn't be defined roles. I'm not saying that there should be defined roles within
men,
the household.
Men and women were created separate.
Exactly.
Have, we have different strengths. We have different weaknesses.
Right, but yet we come together to form that perfect bond of unity with each other. Like, we support each other. Yes, I do think that there should be a dominant and a submissive role within the relationship. If you've got two people that are butting heads all of the time, it's not going to work. But at the same point in time,
got to be give and take on both sides.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. There has to be that threshold of agreement somewhere, because if there's not, then you're just going to be bumping your head the whole time. But to think that God only speaks to men, or that God only speaks to a man preacher, or that God only speaks to somebody with a degree, or that God only speaks to somebody who stands behind a pulpit, I think is archaic thinking. And I think that sits the movement of God back like generations sometimes. You know, I took not like a lot of heat, but like there was some people who, like, I put a post out the other day talking about missing evangelism the way that it used to be. You know, I feel like that a lot of people these days, and it's so funny because you sent me the screenshot of somebody who was drowning in the comment section. You know, somebody who was quote unquote trying to pastor, you know, was drowning in the comment section of a post that was put out, that they put out. And Nick was like, yo, look at this dude, man. He's out here drowning, like he's fighting for his life. And it was true. But the thing about it is that we have confused the mission field with the comment section. And it's like, I'm going to get on social media and I'm going to say something. And without context of knowing who I'm saying this to, you know, I'm just going to wing it out there and hope for the best, you know, and it's like, whatever happens, happens. And, you know, a lot of times I feel like we create more division than what we do, you know, bringing people into the glory of God, because it's like, we're just shooting haymakers out there and not even understanding who our audience is, what we're trying to do. We go back to that empathy thing a lot. And it's like, yo, we're painting ourselves as being almost like these, I don't know what movie it was. This, you know, it was a, no. I wasn't thinking that far back, bro. I was thinking like it was that female woman hater club, or like whatever it was. I can't remember the movie it was, man. But, you know, it's like, maybe it was like the Little Rascals or something like that, I think, maybe.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And
there's like a no-girl club.
Yeah, it was a no-girl club, and it's like that one little girl, I can't even remember her name in the movie, wanted to be in the club, and it's like, no, we can't do it. And I feel like, man, that's like that we are creating church to be that way. You know, and this is something I want to hit on really quick, because I know we're trying to motor through these podcasts now because we're getting here late and everything else. But one thing that I do want to hit on really quick, Nick, is dress inside of church. Dress, you know. There was a fellow of mine, a friend of mine, who sent me a video the other day with a pastor telling a story about inviting somebody to church time in and time out, time in and time out. And he showed up one Sunday in his Papa John's uniform, you know, pants ripped up, grease on his shirt, so on and so forth. And the dude met him in the parking lot and said, "This is God's house. We only wear our best in God's house on a Sunday morning." And you know, and so the guy that sent it to me, he's like, "I guess this point could be argued both ways." And I said, to tell you the truth, I do see it both ways. Like, if you've been in church for a minute and you've got some pretty decent clothes, you know, like, I don't think you should come in to God's house on a Sunday morning if you have good, decent clothes in a cutout t-shirt, shorts that are, you know, up to your belly button, you know, and it's like, so it's like, but if you're coming off the streets, you don't know no better, you don't have no better, you know, then it's like, bro, it's like we're welcoming everybody into the kingdom of God. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're welcoming everybody in who wants to accept his mercy, love, grace, forgiveness, who wants to transform their life. So if that's the case, they may not start out looking the best. Neither did you. Neither did I, you know. But we have to allow those people the grace, the space to be who they are right now in order to meet Christ and then transform into who he wants them to be.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's interesting to me, because, I mean, I think you think about suit and tie, you think about those types of things, you know, how I have a very big problem with the I guess, the concept of professionalism.
Yeah.
It's something that I butt heads with it so much because I think it's the stupidest concept ever created.
Right.
Like this idea that a suit and tie makes you smarter, wiser, more trustworthy, more, more good, better at your job. All these types of things, I think, is the biggest amount of BS.
Right.
Like, I mean, I can do my job, if not better, I can do my job just as well in shorts and a t-shirt than wearing, a dress shirt or flannel or khakis or anything like that. I think it's just such a bullcrap concept, and I think that concept has eked its way into Christianity. Where it's like, if someone is on that pulpit and they're preaching the truth, the Word of God with love, and it's really coming at me, I don't care what they're wearing.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if they're wearing, Tupac shirt and ripped up jeans, or if they're wearing a full suit and tie with vests and all that stuff. I mean, it's what is inside. Again, like what Jesus or what God says, it's on the inside that I look at, not on the outward appearance.
Right.
It's what comes out of them that's been poured into them.
Yeah.
And I think it's just this idea, where it's like we've I think I always had this urge, because I'm like, if we, where did we come up with this idea that a suit and tie is your best?
Ooh,
where did that come from?
Right. Yeah.
That's a man-made concept. And I'll tell you right now, it's not in the Bible that you have to wear a suit and tie to church.
Right. Yeah.
I said, where did we come up with the concept that that's our best?
Right.
Why is it that means you're best dressed?
Right.
And I think that's one thing that we really have to think about, because to me, it's just such a dumb concept that I have to wear a suit and tie, and that means I'm giving God my best that day. Well, I think giving God your best is giving Him your time, making Him your priority.
Right, and I was going to even say, so does wearing a suit and tie, which is quote unquote your best, excuse you? Because a lot of times we'll see people in suit and ties that may look their best, but are not giving God their best worship, are not giving God their best prayer, are not giving God their best attention span.
Exactly. So it goes back to what's best.
Right.
You got a guy in a suit and tie who's gripping a pew. Yeah, he looks good on Sunday, but he can't worship. He's not free.
Right.
He's not free in the spirit. He's sitting there bound up in whatever else, holding onto that pew tight.
Right. Yeah.
So what good is that?
Yeah.
What good does that do anybody? What good does that do him?
Right.
What good does that do anybody in that pew, in that line, or in that line of chairs, whatever? And so I think it's just, to me, it's always been such a dumb concept, just even in the professional workplace.
Yeah.
To say that I have to look a certain way in order to be successful, or to be good at my job, or in order to be, I'm losing the word here, but in order to do my job well and to do it on time,
to be proficient.
Yeah, proficient.
Yeah.
And I think it's that mindset has irked its way into the church setting, because it's like, I remember I used to have a band director who was like, what do we wear to the band concert? Oh, you wear what you would wear to church on Sunday. I'm like, well, I don't think you're going to appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's just like, we have this idea, and I think it's just kind of, we've made it a big problem in the workplace. You can't come to work unless you're in khakis with your shirt tucked in and this tie and button-up shirt. And we've allowed that to kind of bleed into the church as well. And I just think it's something that we need to take a step back and again ask ourselves, is this something that God requires of it, or is it something that man has required?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So again, motoring through it tonight, but I think we hit some hot button issues. Are women allowed to carry the word of God? Are women allowed to translate a message? Are women, like before I even close this thing out, Nick, I've been in churches before where, people have given a message in tongues, a woman, and then a woman delivered what the message said, interpreted what the message said. So, there's that. And then also the hot button issue of clothes. How should you be dressing? What should you be doing? If you got a opinion, don't hesitate. Feel free. Shoot us an email. Get on the church page for Richland Church. Talk to us. Let us know, because these are hot button issues that I feel like, and I think Nick does too, are separating the church more than they are.
I'll go a step further here. If these two issues that we've talked about a lot tonight have kept you from going to church,
oh yeah, that would be good. Yeah, that would be good.
If it's something that's kept you from church, if it's something that's caused division from you and God.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic, man. Way to close that out. So we thank you guys so much for listening, for being a part of this. Hit that download button. Tell somebody else that, man, these people are talking about some stuff. You need to listen and see what's up. Tell somebody about People Suck, love them anyways. And until we see you again, we love you so much, and be blessed.